Hello friends, welcome back again for another Betamax Blocker video. Though I promised my European tour that'll be coming next week, today we have a very special guest star. Put your hands together for Surf City All-Star and drummer for Frank Zappa, amongst others, Mr. David Logeman. Mr. Logeman, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Nice to be with you, and I'm glad to be here with all the fans.
Hey, perfect. We've all been waiting to hear from you because we know we have a very important concert coming up. Al Jardine and David Marks with the Surf City All-Stars all
Yep.
together in New York. So, Mr. Logeman, kick us off. What can we expect from this show?
Well, we're going to do a classic greatest hits of the Beach Boys. There might be a few cuts like Sail on Sailor, I Can Hear Music, stuff like that weren't major hits, but we like to put them in the show. And David Marks will be singing quite a few lead vocals. Al, of course, will be singing quite a few. And then, we've got Matt Jardine covering all of Brian's stuff. Um, and the interesting thing is uh, when Mike Love hired me in 1995, he was unhappy with the drummer in the Beach Boys at that time. And at first, I just played in his solo band, which was called the Endless Summer Band. And basically, all those same background musicians were backing him up. And then, it was his goal to get me to be the official drummer in the Beach Boys touring band. So uh, eventually he would bring out Bruce, he'd bring out Al Jardine, he'd bring out David Marks. And basically, the backup band, the augmented band for those Beach Boys shows was the same lineup that people are going to see in Tonawanda. So
Right.
it's pretty cool. I think it's one of the best sounding representations of the Beach Boys because before Carl died, he picked Philip Bardwell to be in the Beach Boys band. And then when Carl died, Philip stayed on at least, I don't know, 6, 7 years and sang all the Carl stuff, sang the lead vocals. Out of everybody that's ever tried to sing that stuff, Phil's the closest. And and then of course when Brian, stopped touring with them, they had several people, Jeff Foskett and Adrian Baker and different people, but Matt Jardine does an incredible job. And then Chris Former, of course, came in the band, and he also sang lead vocals with the touring band. So he'll be singing. All those guys will be singing lead vocals on this show, and it'll be a treat because it sounds so authentic to the original five guys.
It does. Yeah, I know. For those many of my fans know, last time I saw Surf City All-Stars was in Altoona back in 2021. And nice enough to allow me to meet David Marks. And here's my David Marks autograph. I know fans have seen this before. And you had another guest star with you that time. You had Dean Torrance from Jan and Dean. And one
Yes.
memory I have is that Dean Torrance came out on stage. He said, if you had told us back in 1964, 1965 that we'd still be singing these same songs live for an audience 60 or 50, 60 years later, we would have laughed you right out of the building. He said, look at us now. So there you
Well,
go.
I'm glad you brought up Dean. God bless him. He's 85 now
Yep.
and still has good energy, still singing. And that's how I got my start in surf music because I was touring with a lot of classic rock acts and different classic rock artists. And then, yeah, there's a great Jan and Dean one.
Yep.
And
A lot of fun songs.
when Jan had his accident in '66, that really just curtailed their career for a while. Then Jan was recovered enough in '79 to start touring again. And guess who was their backup band? The Beach Boys. So that first year, the Beach Boys backed them up. And then the Beach Boys said, you know what? We got to go do some other stuff and you should do your own thing. So they put together their first band in 1980 and it didn't work out all that well. So then they started hiring guys for another band. And that was the formation of the Surf City All Stars back in the 80s. And
Okay.
after, yeah. And so Dean, he gave me my start in surf music, and yeah, Great
Yeah,
stuff.
there you go.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh.
So many fun albums. And I have some of their 1980s LPs. I'll have to see if any of the guys are on some of those. But uh
Well, uh, we didn't really record with them until much later. Jan did a CD, a solo CD called Second Wave that we some of us played on, and then we did a live CD. Um, and originally that was Jan and Dean, and then after Jan passed, then it just became Surf City All Stars with Dean as a guest. But yeah,
okay.
those are classic records, and you know, just amazing. You
Yeah.
know, Dean started, had his first hit 1959.
It's
And
up there.
so they were a couple of years ahead of the Beach Boys in terms of production and hit records and all of that. And Brian really looked up to Jan and learned a lot about producing and recording from Jan Berry. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I believe it there. And heck, remember Dean Torrance was on Barbara Ann for the Beach Boys recording
yes, he
too. Sometimes
was.
people forget that. So
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. He was
And Brian Wilson co-wrote Surf City with Jan, and even though it was a Jan and Dean record, Brian sang on it, and some of the other Beach Boy backup guys played on it, and that was the very first number one surf music song was Surf
yep.
City.
Yeah, well, we forget that sometimes too. The Beach Boys did it as part of their live set much later. I know in like the 80s and maybe the
Yeah,
90s, I know too. But their big July 4th Philadelphia concert, they put it between Surfing Safari and Surfing USA and do a big medley. It's really good. But
yeah,
yeah, so many people think, oh, that's a Beach Boys song. Well,
right,
it kind of is, but also kind of isn't. So
right. Well,
perfect.
that's where the Surf City All Stars got our name because we played in both bands, and we're like a hybrid band. Uh, Surf City is that first kind of collaboration between both bands, and because it was the number one song, that's where we took our name from. Surf City All
Yeah,
Stars was
perfect.
from
And
Surf City.
heck, there are two girls for every boy, so there you go. Perfect. All right. I will ask while we're on the subject of songs, are you going to do any Jan and Dean covers as part of the show, or is that a
Well,
surprise? Or
since Dean is not on this particular lineup show, no, we will not.
okay,
Usually we'll do Surf City, lately we've been doing, well, let's see. Yeah, we do Little Old Lady, pretty often. And, what else do we do? Well, anyway, we won't be doing it for this particular show in Tonawanda.
that's
We'll
it.
just stick to the Beach Boys.
And the Beach Boys, have also done Little Old Lady from Pasadena, of course.
Yes,
But yeah,
they did.
definitely a song more associated with Jan and Dean, I'd say. Do we have any fun, like really obscure cuts to look for? I know like Al Jardine's been doing She's Got Rhythm live, things that we
Right,
don't generally
right.
hear. Any big surprises, or is that a secret?
No, we're not going to do any deep cut stuff. That's really never been our forte. I mean, occasionally we'll do Warmth of the Sun or something like that, but none of the real deep cuts. And that's something that Al's really passionate about
Right,
because he's kind of carrying on the tradition of what Brian was doing. In fact, the fans probably know that Al now has a lot of the guys from the Brian Wilson band, and he's calling it the Pet Sounds Band. And they're doing dates kind of around these dates. And I think they'll do a lot more. So he's going in that direction, and we're
yeah.
going to stay in the greatest hits kind of
Yeah,
direction. That's what we're known for. So,
yeah, and that is perfectly fine, and that's what a lot of people come to see are those greatest hits. So
yeah.
absolutely, that's perfect. And if you're even half as good as you were in 2021, it's going to be an amazing show, and all those hits are going to sound incredible. So I'm no,
Yep.
I'm looking forward to them. So
Yeah, we're
excellent.
looking forward to it as well. Absolutely.
Very good, very good. All right, so do you want to talk a little bit more about Brian Wilson? Of course, he recently passed away.
Yeah, I
Um,
do want to
you
talk
know,
about him.
yeah,
Um, the interesting thing that most fans may not know, Brian Wilson was the first Beach Boy that the Surf City All Stars ever backed up. We were on a mini tour of the Hawaiian Islands back in 1990. And we were doing, we were backing up a lot of artists. Jen and Dean was one of them. And at that time, not only did we have Gary Griffin, myself, Philip Bardwell, Chris Farmer, but also Jeffrey Foskett. A lot of Beach Boy fans remember Jeffrey. God rest his soul. He died a couple of years ago. But when we were flying over on the plane, our first date was in Honolulu. And on the plane was Brian Wilson, Danny Hutton, which is one of his really good friends, and Dr. Landy, Dr.
Oh,
Eugene Landy, the crazy psychiatrist. So we were shocked because normally Dr. Landy didn't allow Brian at that time to travel very much. But here they were on the plane. So Dean said, "Hey, Brian, would you like to come to our show? We've got a bunch of people on the bill." And Brian said yes, but nobody expected him to show up because Dr. Landy really kept him on a short leash, would not really let him do a whole lot. But sure enough, he showed up.
huh.
And I got to meet him backstage, which was a huge thrill because I was a huge Beach Boy fan. So then Dean said to Brian, "Hey, you haven't sang in a long, long time. Beach Boys kicked you out of your own band. Why don't you come on stage and join us?" And Brian says, well, maybe. And nobody thought that that would happen, but he did. He
Oh,
came on stage,
uh,
he sang like 7, 8, greatest hits of the Beach Boys. We did Surfer Girl, we did Surfing USA, we did California Girls. Wouldn't it be nice? And he sounded so good. I can't even tell you how great he sounded. And it was one of the thrills of my life. And, of course, little did I know 5 years later, Mike Love would hire me. But of course, by then, Brian wasn't in the lineup. So, but I did get to perform with him. And then later on, we'll talk about how I got to record with him as well.
oh, hey, that would be amazing though to work with Brian. And for those who don't know, this was Brian's last live album here. Amazing album. He was a fantastic live artist, and I got to see him several times as a solo performer, and including on his farewell tour. But yeah, I mean, amazing. Even right up till his last tour, he still sounded great, I thought.
Yeah.
So to work with him like that, was Dr. Landy scary? I would think he'd be a little bit scary.
Well, he seemed pretty pleasant. I think he was on his best behavior because he wanted to project, a friendly image to us. But I mean, I could just tell because Brian would look at him, before he answered a question, before he would commit to anything. He was always looking for approval to Dr. Landy. So I would hear behind the scenes, horror stories about Dr. Landy. And I was so happy when I heard that they finally pried him away from Brian and freed him from that. Although, who knows if Brian would have done some of the early things that he did without Dr. Landy. I mean, I think there was some good to it, but a lot of damaging stuff as well.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus because Landy has a writing and production credit on his first album. He has some Beach Boys, credits like their 80s work and stuff like that. But in a way, he saved Brian's life, yes, but at what cost? I know it's kind of some of
Yeah.
the ideas there, but
Yeah, and
very,
the family used that particular CD to get his license stripped from him and to get the that whole stewardship thing stripped away because that was unprofessional what he did, unethical, unprofessional,
yeah.
and that was the end of that. And at that time, that was a good thing for Brian to be free from that.
Yeah, and I know later copies of this record, they stripped all his credits off. His wife or girlfriend had some credits on there too. Hers were all scrubbed out, everything. So yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a interesting bit there. And I guess speaking of solo career, what can you tell us about Al Jardine?
Well, I met Al when Mike Love hired me. I first started in his solo band, which was called the Endless Summer Band, and all the extra musicians were the Beach Boys extra musicians. And I did that for about maybe a year. And then Al started bring, I mean, Mike Love started bringing out Bruce and did more corporate stuff. And then my very first hard ticket concert that was called the Beach Boys, and it was Mike, Bruce, and Al. And that was the first time I'd ever met Al, first time I worked with him. And that was a thrill because, I mean, he's iconic guy and sang great. And let me tell you a funny story about that concert. So back then, and even to this day, when we have a set list on stage, we list the songs in the order that we're going to do them. We usually just use a one word to describe the song.
Yeah.
Instead of putting God Only Knows, we'll just put God. And instead of California Girls, we'll put maybe Cowgirls or whatever. So at one point, I had two columns, and on the top of the column of the second column was Rhonda. But when I put I hung up the set list on a post so I could see it with duct tape, and I accidentally covered the R. So it said Honda instead of Rhonda. So I start into Honda, which starts with this drum beat. And of course, people know that as Little Honda, which is one of their hits. And Al Jardine turns around and looks at me like I am a crazy nut and stops the whole thing. And I was so embarrassed.
Oh.
So after the show, Al said, "What happened?" And I told him,
Oh,
and then he laughed. And he said, "Well, it happens to us all. Welcome to the Beach Boys." Yeah.
oh, they
So
are
Al's
both good
great.
songs.
Al's
Oh
great.
my.
I'm looking
So,
forward to seeing him again. And it's been a few months since I played with him. Uh, he comes out with the Surf City All-Stars occasionally as a guest, whenever a client has the budget, to include him. So it'll be good to see him.
yeah, and he has a terrific current tour group, the sort of that
Yeah.
Pet Sounds tour band stuff like that. And I saw his big homecoming show, and that was really good. Did a lot of hits, a few unusual things, some of his solo work. Of course, he has
Right.
a new solo EP out too, Islands in the Sun. But I'll tell you a funny story. I only met Al a couple times, but the first time I met him, he was kind of a little bit sick of dealing with fans. He wanted to be over with it. And they were taking photos of all of us together. I told him, good thing they took two pictures. And he said, why is that? I said, they could mail one to them old cotton fields back home. He thought that was pretty funny. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, but I'll be excited to see him again because I've never seen him play with the Surf City All-Stars before. So definitely be impressive.
I think you'll like it because it's more like what he used to do in, the original Beach Boy lineup. And, like I say, I love the Pet Sounds band. I love Brian's band. My original keyboard player, Gary Griffin, left the Surf City All Stars to be in Brian's band, but Gary will be with us on the Tonawanda date. So a lot of people remember him. Gary recorded toured with the Beach Boys back in 78, 79, and also recorded with them. I can't remember which album he was on. Oh, yeah, that's great. David
Yep.
Marks. Yeah,
Figured I hope. Sadly,
yeah.
no David Marks on Shutdown Volume 2, but we got most everybody.
Well, the thing is, they used some tracks from volume one on that, and David is actually on some of those cuts, but he's not pictured at that point because he was already out of the band. But he
All right,
is on that
actually,
album.
hold up one that this is the one I probably should have held up. Live from
Oh
Paradise
yeah,
Cove. There we
yeah.
go.
Well, here's a
So
cool thing that the fans may not remember, and that is David Marks was on their very first nationwide hit. He sang and played guitar on Surf and Safari, and he was also on their last nationwide hit in 2012, which was That's Why God Made the Radio. So it's pretty cool that he was on the very first nationwide hit and the last nationwide hit.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool.
that photo was from Paradise Cove here
Yep.
in the LA area, and I've got outtakes of that photo shoot that are unique that fans will be able to buy at the show, and David will sign it for them.
That is so cool. I know
Yeah.
he and I talked about this picture when I met him, and he said how the photo shoot just took forever. It was picture after picture after picture after picture. Granted, he was 13 or 14, so he was probably done after the first couple, but how
Yeah.
long it took them to do this. And I guess technically the Surfer Girl album cover is an outtake from that too. But
Yes,
yeah,
that
okay.
they went to I think they did it in the same session, the Surfer Girl album cover and that album cover. Here's an interesting story. They're wearing, hold that up again and
Oh yeah,
let me
sure.
are they wearing the Pendletons? Yeah,
Yeah,
they're
I
wearing
think
the
so.
Pendleton shirts there. So David told me, Brian Wilson, the funeral was a few days ago, and I was doing a recording session that I'll talk about here pretty soon. And so I didn't go to the actual funeral, but David said that Mike Love showed up with his original Pendleton. He was
Oh,
wearing that original Pendleton to Brian Wilson's funeral. And
oh,
boy, David, I asked David, I said, "Do you have your original Pendleton from that shoot?" And he said, "Well, after I left the band, I lent it to Al Jardine." And he said, "Al never gave it back."
oh.
So he doesn't have his original Pendleton. But that's
Okay.
an interesting story about that.
That
Yeah,
is really, and then they didn't stick with the Pendletons for long. They replaced them with the stripes pretty quickly,
right.
which I think that'd be better for like live concert wear. No, it's maybe not as heavy as the Pendleton would be. So, okay,
Right.
that's pretty cool. So yeah, tell us about that recording session.
Well, as I was mentioning earlier, I'm a spiritual person, and I always felt like whenever I was trying to figure out the twists and turns of my career, because I'm a believer in Jesus, I always would pray for guidance and direction and open doors and stuff.
Sure.
And after the Surf City Allstars, I kind of felt that was kind of inspired by Brian, because the same year he formed his band, I heard about it and I thought, what a great idea. So in 1999, I formed the Surf City Allstars, and very quickly we released a live CD. And then as time went on, we updated it with, guests like Al and David and Dean. And so after we did that, I was praying and I'm like, man, what should we do next? Because there's only so much of that you can do. And then I felt like I had this inspiration and the realization that the Beach Boys never did an unplugged greatest hits record. And they had done an unplugged record. The Party album was done with all acoustic instruments, but it wasn't a greatest hits record. Barbara Ann came off of that record. But so anyway, I thought, wow, what a great idea. And all the guys in the All Stars thought it was a great idea. So we started recording some interesting unplugged arrangements that are, some of them are exactly like or similar to the originals, others are kind of different, but yet still recognizable. So then I told the guys, I said, it's my dream to have all the original Beach Boys record with this. And they said, you're crazy. It'll never happen. Never happen. Well, at that point, David Marks had already been fired from the Beach Boys because he was back in the band for a while in the 90s. So he's the first Beach Boy that I record on the Unplugged. And then Al got fired. I put Al on it. And then Gary Griffin had already left the Surf City All Stars to join Brian's band. So one day in a rehearsal, Gary says to Brian, hey, we're doing an unplugged greatest hits of the Beach Boys. And Brian goes, what a great idea. I want to hear that. So Brian came over to the studio and we were working on a unplugged version of All Summer Long. And Brian goes, oh, this is incredible. I love it. I want to sing on it. So we set up a mic. Brian sang on it. We got his lead vocal. And then he said, I'd like to do more. Well, later on, he got distracted and he never really came back. And when I contacted Brian's manager to release it, they said, oh, no, you can't release that because he's on another record label. We're not going to be able to get permission. It's going to be kind of competition for what he's doing. Just sit on it. Maybe it can be released later. Well, I kind of forgot about it. And then once I talked Mike Love into it, and then Gary Griffin reminded me, oh, by the way, we do have Brian. Well, So when I did some unplugged stuff with Mike, it just so happened Bruce was singing backgrounds on some of that stuff. And then the last Beach Boy, uh, and this was gotten from a rehearsal, but was Carl. And it was Carl in the mid 90s before he died of cancer. And then I used that and added classical guitar, viola, percussion, and so I've got all the Beach Boys. The only Beach Boy I don't have is Dennis. Dennis died in '83, and he was the only
Yeah.
Beach Boy that I didn't meet or get a chance to work with. So um, I'm hoping that this will get released next year because next year's the 60th anniversary of Pet Sounds, and there's two songs on this unplugged that are from Pet Sounds. I've got Al singing a duet with Matt, a beautiful version of God Only Knows, and I've got Carl singing Caroline No, just an incredible arrangement. So I hope this is the first live interview of me telling the fans about this project because I want the fans' support as this goes forward, so that hopefully this will come out next year and not get buried and with everything else that's going on in Beach Boy land. So
It should be amazing, though, just from what you've said. It sounds incredible to have, something that's not just another compilation, but something that's truly unique, but yet has all those classic songs. So that should be a blast. I'm so privileged that you told me about it too. So
yeah,
I can something to look forward to. Very good, very good.
yeah.
David, we are almost out of time. Do you want to have me start another call and we can finish it up, talk about the Reddit stuff?
No, I think I think we've got the bulk of kind of what I wanted to cover with the fans, and
Hey,
we can
very
do
good.
another one another time, maybe
Sure.
after the show, after the Tonawanda show, and we can talk with more stuff.
Hey, perfect. You did want to push out something about Reddit, though, as I recall. So you can do that now, and that'll take us to the end.
I can't remember what I was going to talk about with that. Um, is that
Was it,
live album? No, that's not the live
was it
album
a
that we did.
Q&A?
I don't remember. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay. I could take a look at that link you sent me, and fans, if that link is has everything that Mr. Logeman wants, I'll post that down below so you can find it very easily. And I can also link the Surf City All-Stars webpage, of course.
Yeah.
So very good, very good. Hey, everybody, this has been Betamax Blocker with Mr. David Logeman, master drummer. So, Mr. Logeman, anything to take us out on?
Yeah. Long live surf music and God bless all the Beach Boy fans.
Hey, very good. And you know what? Beach Boys bring everybody together. So it's
Absolutely.
beautiful music that everybody can enjoy. And I know I'm looking forward to this concert, and I'm going to be hunting for photos so I can do a little review and picture collage of the show afterwards. So
Absolutely.
be perfect. All right. Hey,
Thanks a
fans,
lot,
thanks for
Alex.
watching. Yep, no problem. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you later. So long.
All right. Bye bye.